There are 8 brand new episodes of Invincible Season 3. Some were really great, but others were kinda mid. So we're gonna find out which is which by ranking every single episode of Season 3 on this tier list. Starting with Episode 1, You're Not Laughing Now. This is a solid introduction to this brand new season of Invincible. First of all, it shows us what the characters were doing in between seasons. Mark was training with Cecil after he got washed by Anissa in Season 2.
I ain't gonna lie, I'm getting cooked.
Guardians of the Globe are all back together after Shrinking Ray and Rexplode have fully healed. Also, Duplicate is alive. Yay! Now her and the Immortal could be the most insufferable couple of all time. And Oliver is no longer a little purple baby, he's now a little purple boy. And these little character advancements make for some great setup for the rest of the season. Now that Invincible is stronger, he's able to fight stronger enemies and probably still get whooped, because losing is kind of his thing. And now that Oliver is an actual character, it creates a new dynamic in the Grayson household. Debbie is doing her best to raise him, and the scenes between them are really sweet. Episode 1 also does a solid job at introducing new characters and new plot points. Fightmaster and Dropkick are twins who steal the Declaration of Independence, and it seemed a lot easier for them than when Nicolas Cage did it. Duplicate's brother Multipol is also introduced, and he's a lot more psychopathic than his sister.
Oh, we're so sorry to hear about your brother that passed away. He gets 5 big booms. Boom! 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 Boom!
And most importantly, this episode is the beginning of the growing conflict between Mark and Cecil. During the huge battle with Doc Seismic, Cecil calls in Darkwing and the Reaniman. Literally, they drop down from the battle bus or something. And seeing these villains from the past couple seasons really sets Mark off. Steven Yeun is great in every episode of this show, but some of his line delivery here is top notch. You can hear in his voice just how truly done he is.
Why the hell is he here? And why the f*** are those things here?
Mark's fury at Cecil is completely justifiable. Darkwing and D.A. Sinclair are criminals. They're both murderers and have committed horrible atrocities. And they're both specifically villains to Invincible, because he's the one who brought them to jail. Mark thinks that they should serve their punishment and rot in their cells. But on the flip side, Cecil's perspective is also understandable. He wants to keep the world safe. It's his job, his responsibility. And while using these villains is super shady, they actually did help. All of Earth's heroes were about to lose until he stepped in. Mark and Cecil's relationship gets destroyed in future episodes, but episode 1 does a fantastic job at setting it up. The action sequences are enjoyable as well. Doc Seismic getting control of these giant earth bugs and becoming an actually threatening villain is pretty fun. I mean, he still sounds like a Redditor, but still. And it's really enjoyable seeing all these heroes, some of which we've never seen before, in a big action set piece like this. Also, Rexplode is letting it all hang out, which, good for him, man. I bet there's a nice breeze down there. If I had to say one bad thing about this whole Doc Seismic plotline, is that it's not the most memorable thing in the world. Overall, the most impactful things in this episode story-wise is the future stories it sets up, and not the story of the actual episode. Something I want to mention now, instead of mentioning in every other episode ranking, is the animation. Yeah, I can't really defend this animation. There was a decline from Season 1 to Season 2, and it seems like there was also a decline from Season 2 to Season 3. The action sequences mostly look fine, but it's the moments where characters just talk or do mundane things where the animation looks stilted and cheap. I would say this is Family Guy quality animation, but that would honestly be an insult to the hard-working animators over at Family Guy. Every Peter Griffin and chicken fight has more sauce than the entirety of Invincible Season 3. And I don't want it to seem like I'm hating on these animators, because I'm sure they're doing their best, but it really seems like the show's budget is going to the growing celebrity cast and not the animation. Like, did you really have to cast Shang-Chi as Multipol? You couldn't have gotten a professional voice actor who was probably cheaper? You had to get the MCU star? Anyway, unless there's an animation moment that is especially terrible, I'm not gonna factor it into the ranking. because it's something that affects the entire season. So with that said, episode 1, You're Not Laughing Now, is a solid episode with a kind of forgettable plot, so it's going in A tier. Episode 2, A Deal with the Devil, is an episode all about Cecil Stedman. We get a flashback of his early days at the GDA, and we see how he became the man that he is now. This backstory is paramount for explaining Cecil's perspective. When he was young, he was just like Mark. He wanted to be a hero who helped people, even getting seriously injured and permanently damaging his face to do so. All the skin and hair on his body is synthetic, which makes you wonder why they couldn't save his hairline. Why are they doing this man like that? Forget what the villains are doing. That's the real crime right there. We also learn that Cecil originally had the same opinions on supervillains as Mark. They shouldn't get a second chance, they should just stay in jail. But Cecil changes his opinion after his time in prison, and now he sees criminals as tools, things to use to help save the world. The episode perfectly transitions from Cecil's backstory to his confrontation with Mark, and this is one of the most well put together sequences of the entire show. When the tension rises and Mark starts going to town on these Reanimen, and Cecil busts out the button that causes that sound to go off in Mark's ear, the intensity, the urgency, and the betrayal is on full display. These two have worked together fine before, but now it really seems like Cecil is trying to force him into being another one of his tools. And it's a really cool storytelling moment when the Guardians of the Globe show some agency and go against Cecil. When I saw this for the first time, I freaking cheered. And Mark killing the Reanimen in the same way in place that his father killed the original Guardians of the Globe is the icing on the cake, because it perfectly shows Mark's struggle to control his brutal Viltrumite self. This episode truly pushed Mark to his limits, to the point where he gave Cecil a very genuine, very serious threat, and the aftermath of this episode will have lasting ramifications for the entire series. This whole scenario makes Mark doubt himself. He starts thinking that maybe there are times where it is right to kill. If he had taken out Darkwing or Sinclair, then Cecil wouldn't be able to use them to serve his own means. He begins to lose confidence in his identity as a hero and what he's doing. Also, the Guardians of the Globe break up into two different teams. You have the based, epic, red-pilled, awesome team with Rexplode, Monster Girl, Robot, Shrinking Ray, and Bulletproof, who say to hell with Cecil and leave. And then you have the beta losers with the Immortal, Duplicate, Black Samson, and Shapesmith, who think somehow Mark was in the wrong and decide to stay. Seriously, the Immortal outs himself as one petty motherfucker. He goes on and on about how Mark got what he deserved and faced the actions of his consequences, which is nonsense. We can all see right through him. He just has a vendetta against Mark because his dad has a 3-0 score on him.
Oh! You gotta get big, Meg!
Like I said in my ranking for episode 1, the Immortal and Duplicate are the worst couple on this show. This fight also causes issues in Mark's home life. After telling his family about what happened, Oliver begins to show some concerning signs.
Well, why didn't you kill him already? Then you wouldn't have to worry.
So that's a bit of a red flag. The final important thing to mention about episode 2 is its ending. Mark and Eve finally get together. Frickin' finally! We've been waiting for this since season 1. Goodbye, Amber. Goodbye, Fish Queen. Mark and Eve is the true ship of this show, and we're all better for it. Yeah, episode 2, A Deal with the Devil, is a brilliant episode, and it's one of the best episodes of the entire series. It has to go in S tier. Episode 3, You Want a Real Costume, Right? Is for sure the messiest episode of the season so far. The episode feels kinda all over the place in a lot of different ways, and we'll get to that, but where this episode is really good is when it focuses on Mark and Oliver. Oliver obviously wants to be a hero just like his brother, and most of this episode is him attempting to be one and failing to do so. He finally gets his own suit from Art and proudly calls himself
Kid Omni-Man is here!
Which, yeah, naming yourself after the guy who did this is really bad. But also, why not call him Omni Kid? That's so much better. Drop the man. it's cleaner. And the two battles they get into showcase how much Oliver can't use his powers and how much Mark is holding back. At the prison, Oliver gets wrecked almost immediately, and as soon as that happens, Invincible decides to take it up a notch and beats these villains almost instantly. The ending battle is where the true crazy stuff happens though. The Mauler twins make their return and fight the Timu Guardians of the Globe, who get completely demolished in 1 minute and 38 seconds. And yes, I actually timed it. They're truly that awful. Let's watch the Immortal get hit just for fun. But when Mark and Oliver show up, we see Mark struggle because he's still holding back. Oliver does not hold back, and with like 2 punches, he puts a hole in one Mauler twin and explodes the head of the other. This scene makes it clear that he really is Omni-Man's son. Also, Cecil shows up to give us a single funniest image of the entire show.
But I know you were just trying to help.
These action scenes are really entertaining and also great at developing Oliver as a character, because after all of the, murder,
What murder?
Debbie and Mark talk to Oliver and help him understand why he shouldn't kill. And it seems like he's progressing into someone more like Invincible and less like Omni-Man. And that's really where episode 3 peaks. A lot of the side stories in this episode are good but not great, and some of them are just kinda bad. There's a really cool opening scene that shows these two supervillains who try to escape their life of crime. They get jobs, they have an apartment together, but life is not kind to them. They struggle financially and are forced back into crime. A lot of people might look at that scene and say, what was even the point of that? But I don't know. I think it helps to flesh out this world a little bit more. We know more about these two characters than we did previously, and the whole sequence was artfully done. We catch back up with the based Guardians of the Globe, who move back into their old headquarters. There's not a whole lot to this other than something going on between Rex and Ray. And finally, we spend more time with Eve, who is going to college and mix up with her parents. Again, these stories aren't the real highlight of the episode, but they help to flesh out these characters a little bit more and make them seem like real people. There's a side plot with Titan, who was a minor villain in the first season, and I don't care about this at all. He's getting hassled by the bigger mob boss to free Multi-Paul from prison, and knowing where this story goes in future episodes, I just don't care. Also, Debbie is seeing a new hunk named Paul, and while these scenes are fine, it makes sense for Debbie to look for companionship. It seems really out of character for her to tell him that Mark is invincible. In this universe, you don't know who could be a supervillain. It just seems very strange for her to do this. However, it is not the worst part of this episode. The worst part is Mark and Eve's relationship stuff. Man, we were waiting so long for these two to get together, and their scenes are terrible. There are 2 whole moments where they just recap what happened in the same episode that we're watching. Why? The parts where they support and reassure each other are nice, but that's not how you write a show. Those scenes in particular really rubbed me the wrong way. But I did enjoy the main story of the episode along with some of the side plots. It's an entertaining episode of television, so I'm going to put episode 3, You Want a Real Costume, Right?, in B tier. Episode 4, You Are My Hero, is a fantastic episode, and an episode that was split into 2 parts, because just like an episode in season 2, it's both an episode of Invincible and an episode of Alan the Alien. Let's look at the Invincible side first. Mark is forced into another superhero expedition that really tests his morals. The twin characters from the premiere episode kidnap him and take him to the future, a future ruled by an evil king. And this sequence has some fun moments. Fightmaster and Dropkick are both reasonably entertaining, and their banter with Mark is really funny at times, but the real great moment is the reveal of who the king is. Ta-da! It's the Immortal, and yeah, we pretty much all saw this coming. He's old, he's crazy, and he just wants it all to end.
Do you know what that does to a man? Century after century after century.
He honestly kind of sounds like me when I turned 23. This is a really interesting look at who the Immortal could potentially become, and I really want to praise Ross Marquand's fantastic voice work. Not only does he sell the insanity of the Immortal, but his voice is also completely unrecognizable as a ton of other characters. He voices Rudy, Aquarius, Red Skull in the Avengers films, and even Ultron in What If. You might also recognize him as Aaron from The Walking Dead. He's a very talented actor, and his work here is exceptional. And he also does a pretty good Matthew McConaughey impression.
This is stellar. This is interstellar.
No! No!
The Immortal presents a really compelling dilemma for Mark. Mark still doesn't want to kill ever. He's so afraid of becoming his father that he doesn't ever want to take a life ever again. But the Immortal is forcing his hand. He wants to die so much that he forces Mark to do it. And so Mark does. Really easily. This experience adds to Mark's doubt from the previous episodes on if it's right to never take a life. After Invincible gets back, there's a bunch of Mark and Eve stuff, and I actually like these scenes. They're not just sitting here recapping what we already saw in the episode. Eve is able to reassure Mark about what he's doing as a superhero. And then they go on a flying date, and it's very adorable. This is the cutesy Mark-Eve stuff I wanted in the previous episode. But while everything I have mentioned so far has been good, where episode 4 really shines is in its second half, where we follow Alan the alien, who breaks out of the Viltrumite prison. Alan is a goated character. He's my personal favorite character of the entire show, and he really shines here. While Nolan is accepting his execution, Alan is trying to convince him to see a better way, to fight alongside him and Mark and Oliver against the Viltrumites. He's such a hopeful and optimistic character, and he rubs off on Nolan, and the two become genuine friends. And there are so many fantastic moments, like Alan staging a breakout and getting all the prisoners involved, or the reveal that frickin' Battle Beast is on board, or what is the moment of the episode, when Alan is in trouble and Nolan decides to finally fight back.
Get away from him!
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
This action sequence is truly exceptional, and has what I would now consider to be an iconic moment. And the final reveal that there are less than 50 Viltrumites left in existence is the perfect way to end the episode. What else can I say? Episode 4, You Are My Hero, is amazing. It has some of the best moments of the entire season. It's going in S tier. Yeah, it's fitting we go from one of the best episodes of the season to one of the worst. Episode 5, This Was Supposed to Be Easy, is easily the worst episode of the season, because it mostly focuses on Titan, a boring side character who I don't really care about. He's getting threatened by this dragon dude to free Multiball out of prison, and so he hatches a scheme with Radiohead from season 1 to take him out. And it's not interesting in the slightest. It really is just poorly written. It's a bunch of characters going on and on about how smart Titan is, and how good he is for this neighborhood, but he doesn't ever really fully become a character. And it would be one thing if this was the plot of the episode, and our main characters still had good character stories that tied into it, but no, they don't have anything going on. They fight a dragon, that's pretty cool, I guess. It's fun to see Invincible and Adam Eve combine their powers to fight this guy, but their involvement in this crime story doesn't give them any sort of character development at all. The most that happens with them this episode is that in the beginning they want to move in together, and at the end they decide not to. How riveting. So because nothing really happens with any of the main characters, this episode really does feel like filler. Yeah, I don't have much to say about the main story of the episode, because almost none of it feels important to the rest of the series.
You. I know. You're a disappointment.
However, there are a few moments from episode 5 that do win it back for me a little bit. Rexplode and Ray have a really nice moment together. It seems like these two are sharing what could possibly be a romance. Oliver is beginning to show restraint with his powers. He simply embarrasses these bullies instead of, exploding their heads. And Mark and Eve create a company called Invincible Inc., where people and companies can hire Invincible to do superhero stuff. And yeah, I guess that's it. Episode 5, This Was Supposed to Be Easy, was the most underwhelming episode of the show yet. It's still entertaining, I guess, but it doesn't do a good enough job at advancing the story, and there really isn't anything memorable about it, so I'm gonna have to put it in C tier. Episode 6, All I Can Say Is Sorry, is a phenomenal episode. At its core, it questions what it really means to be a hero. It's the anniversary of when Mark and his father fought in Chicago, when Omni-Man pulled this move. And a new villain named Powerplex is attempting to attack Mark, holding him partly responsible for all the damage done to the city and all the lives that were taken. And while the audience can look at the situation and clearly see that yes, Mark is not responsible, he was a victim just like everyone else, the citizens in the Invincible world don't really know what's going on. They just see a hero who failed to stop a villain and caused a ton of damage in the process. And and the reflection of the events of Chicago make Mark seriously doubt himself. Maybe being a hero isn't all it's cracked up to be. Maybe Mark can't really fight that Viltrumite side of himself. These questions bounce around in his head as he has to live with the fact that he couldn't save everyone, and now there's a supervillain who exists directly because of Mark. Let's talk about Powerplex for a minute. He is one of the best villains of the entire series, with how he's written, his motivations, and of course, his voice actor. Yes, he's played by Aaron Paul.
You can't keep getting away with it!
As the catalyst for this entire story, Powerplex really works. In the opening scene, we see him witness the death of his sister and niece because of Omni-Man and Invincible's fight, but he doesn't jump straight to being a supervillain and trying to make Mark pay. He goes through the legal system first. He gets signatures to try Invincible in the court of law. He even goes to the DA to convince her to deliver some sort of justice, but she tells him that superheroes are outside of normal laws, and that's when Scott Duvall truly becomes Powerplex. He's just a desperate, downhearted man who takes justice into his own hands. But sadly, Invincible ghosts him for almost the entire episode. In Powerplex's first attack, they send Shapesmith to bring him in and he gets washed. Then later, Adam Eve fights him, and this is a pretty cool fight. She's able to stop him pretty much on her own, which just goes to show how incompetent the new Guardians of the Globe are. But eventually, Powerplex and Invincible come to blows. But this fight isn't cool or epic or anything like that. It's just tragic. It feels like a gut punch watching this unwell man who can't properly control his powers take his years of frustrations out on Mark and his own family. The reveal of what he had done with the ash floating in front of his face is haunting. It's a really tragic end to his story. Powerplex wants superheroes to face justice for all the collateral damage they cause, only for him to cause collateral damage in a similar way. And it must be said, Aaron Paul is phenomenal. He brings so much range to Powerplex and does a great job at making him a unique, sad villain. The rest of the episode is smaller things, but everything feels like it's progressing the story. Rudy makes a belt that stops Monster Girl from de-aging, and that's a really sweet moment. And Ray and Rex have a really compelling talk, and she says that she's leaving the good Guardians team. She doesn't want to constantly almost die and not have a life of her own. But Rex doesn't know a life outside of being a superhero, so he doesn't want to give it up. Both perspectives are completely valid, and show a different side to being a superhero that we don't normally see. These two have received a lot of character development this season, and I can honestly say that they're becoming some of my favorite characters. Episode 6, All I Can Say Is Sorry, is the best episode of the season so far. It takes a unique, complex approach to the idea of superheroes, it furthers the stories of the major characters, and it introduces a fantastic new villain. It's an easy S-tier episode. Episode 7, What Have I Done, is insane. It's the Invincible War, when Angstrom Levy, who was revealed to be alive, claims his revenge against Invincible. This is the craziest thing the show has ever done. 16 evil versions of Mark descend upon the main world and destroy everything. This is the most dire the show has ever been, and the episode does a fantastic job at crafting this story. It breaks up the events into separate days, and it shows a bunch of characters across the globe struggling with the different versions of Mark, including cameos from Wolfman and Tech Jacket. Although, really, we couldn't get a Spawn cameo. You really had to be stingy, Todd. You couldn't let him play with the other kids like you did in the comics? Come on. And the characters we're more familiar with are also struggling. Both Guardians of the Globe's teams get decimated. The Beta Squad stands no chance at all against No Goggles Mark. Black Samson is useless. Shapesmith gets ripped in half. Duplicate ain't doing anything. Darkwing gets trapped in the Shadow Realm with this Invincible. And the Immortal gets folded yet again. The Alpha Guardians team also gets destroyed, and oh man, they're all helpless against Mark except for one, and this hurts. I've mentioned a ton that Rexplode has become one of my favorite characters in this show. He went from one of the most annoying to one of the most beloved, and his sacrifice scene was so tragic. Rex completely ran out of things to explode except for his own goddamn skeleton.
Oh, no, no.
Let's all raise a glass to Rex. He died as he lived, blowing motherfuckers up. It actually makes me upset that the Immortal and Duplicate get to retire and live happily ever after, while Rex is dead and Ray has to suffer his death. Dear God, Please give all of Rex and Ray's pain to these losers. And a ton of other minor heroes we've seen across the seasons die as well, including the frickin' boss baby, I guess. Something that makes this episode as effective as it is the different versions of Invincible. All of them are really unique from one another. With their designs and Steven Yeun's unique vocal performances, you can kinda understand who all of them are. Sinister Mark is just plain evil. No Goggles Mark thinks everything is a joke. Mask Invincible is a mama's boy. Omni-Vincible is very similar to his dad. It has an all-timer of a line.
F off! I got this. Swearing doesn't make you cool.
Emperor Mark has definitely said slurs before. Mohawk Mark is a more extreme version of Invincible. And No Mask Invincible, well,
you are gay.
The uniqueness of these Invincibles help them to be better villains. Angstrom Levy is the big bad of this episode, and he's the one aspect I don't completely love. His motivations are completely clear, and his plan of making the entire world hate Invincible is so sinister. But I just wish we got more screen time with him. The episode kinda rushes this storyline, where he gets saved by these mysterious technicians, and then when Angstrom fails to bring Prime Invincible to them, they, I guess, make him a slave? I don't really know what's going on here. I guess we'll find out next season. This whole storyline just seemed kinda underbaked to me. But something that didn't seem underbaked is the action scenes. These all go so incredibly hard. It really seems like a ton of the animation budget went to the many Invincible fights, as well as the final fight between Mark and Angstrom. This sequence is honestly really impressive and reminds me of season 1. It looks good. What can I say? This episode has good animation. The last thing I'll mention about episode 7 is how it continues Mark's story. Mark was already doubting his superhero identity and his moral code as a superhero. Because Mark didn't actually murder Angstrom the first time, he returned and caused all of this. So Mark blames himself for everything the other Hims did, and he now understands that in order to save lives, he sometimes has to take them, which perfectly transitions into how this episode ends.
Stand ready for my arrival, worm.
Conquest has arrived. Episode 7 is a phenomenal episode with some minor issues. So let's toss it in A tier, but before we move on to the final episode, I just want to say, if you're enjoying this video, why not hit that subscribe button? I post a bunch of fun videos like this one every single month, and once we get to 100k subs, I'm releasing a tier list of every single Star Wars movie and show. So if you want to see that, make sure you're subscribed. Episode 8, I Thought You'd Never Shut Up, is what this season has been leading up to. The fight between Invincible and Conquest. This is the crowning jewel of the episode and of the entire season. The majority of the runtime is dedicated to this single battle, and it truly is something to behold. It does a fantastic job at properly displaying how powerful these people are. With a single punch, Conquest is able to level the entire city, and he's able to do things to Mark that virtually no one has been able to do before. He sends him flying with a single backhand, he snaps his leg in half with a karate chop, and he crushes Mark's hand with his own. Mark is pushed to his limits both physically and mentally.
Oh no, bro.
And you would think that watching these two pound on each other for 20-something minutes would get stale, but it doesn't at all. It manages to add a ton of variety to these sequences by changing locations, injuring the characters to the point where they have to fight differently, and by including both Oliver and Adam Eve. Oliver doesn't really do much, he's still just a kid. He gets a couple hits off, but he almost gets ripped in half. The one nice moment with him this episode is Debbie letting him go off to fight. She's obviously incredibly worried, but she also knows that he's probably one of the only people who could help, even if he already needs veneers. Eve's part of the fight is much more impressive and really showcases how she is arguably the strongest character in the universe. She throws everything at Conquest. She really said random bullshit go, but it's not enough. And Conquest is able to beat her and oh, what the f?
What's wrong with you, bro? What the heck? You tripping, bro? You tripping?
Adam Eve's death, or almost death, is so well done. Mark's desperate attempts to keep her alive, Conquest taunting him in the background, and Steven Yeun's heartbreaking vocal performance. It's the perfect, earth-shattering plot point to lead to the end of the fight. Invincible is no longer holding back, and his sheer brutality and savagery is on full display. The violent Viltrumite he's been trying to hide all season is finally out, and creates some truly breathtaking moments. The conclusion of the fight is really satisfying, with Adam Eve rebuilding her body and blasting Conquest, Mark seeing his opportunity and taking Conquest down, Mark using his head to defeat Conquest because he has no limbs left. Episode 8 does a great job at concluding Mark's character arc. In order for him to truly keep his family safe, he will have to take lives, and Conquest is the first person he has ever killed. At least he thinks. Cecil decides to keep him alive, because that's gonna end well. This long action sequence is truly excellent, and the two things that make it excellent is the stunning animation that puts the rest of the season to shame, and Conquest himself. In only one episode, he instantly became one of the greatest villains not only in the show, but in all of comic book media. Compared to every other Viltrumite we've seen, he is by far the most sadistic and evil. Through his battle time conversation with Mark, we completely understand how he became this vile. After thousands and thousands of years of isolated warfare, he's sorta lost his conscience. He doesn't have friends or family. He's feared by the other Viltrumites. He's not really a person anymore. Now he's just a weapon. A purpose. He is Conquest in the shape of a man. And I want everyone who said Jeffrey Dean Morgan was a bad choice for this character to shut up forever. He was so damn good.
No one wants to be my friend. They think I am unstable.
And you can hear his thirst for bloodshed, his quiet longing for a different life, and his joy for combat all in Morgan's voice. Also, this casting is perfect because, of course, this is just Glenn and Negan in different form, and it felt very therapeutic to see Glenn get his revenge.
Back to it.
The rest of the episode is also fantastic. Rexplode's funeral was really sad. The scenes that set up season 4 with Battle Beast, the Sequids, and Damien Darkblood are all very interesting, but I really enjoyed the moments we got between Mark and Eve, and to see them support each other and fight for each other was really nice, and I cannot wait to see them again in season 4. Episode 8, I Thought You'd Never Shut Up, was as perfect as an episode could be, and I think it's finally the episode that dethrones the season 1 finale as the best episode of the show. But I'm not gonna put it in S tier. I'm gonna put it in triple S tier. Woo! And that's my ranking for Invincible season 3. All in all, I think this was a pretty great season of television. How would you rank these episodes, and what did you think of season 3? Make sure to let me know down in the comments. And if you want to check out another video, you can click here to watch my review of Invincible season 2. It's a bit of an older video, but it's still pretty funny. Or you can click on this video that YouTube picked out just for you.